Hi, welcome to K-Tech Designs. My name is Seth. Welcome to this tutorial on an iPhone 6s skin case with FreeCad. In this tutorial, I'll demonstrate the use of Boolean operation to make an iPhone case. And with that, let's get started. So just like my previous video, to find the overall dimensions of an iPhone, you simply Google iPhone 6s size dimensions, and it'll come up with the overall dimensions there. So you get your length, your width, and your depth. All right, let's get started on this model. I've already created a save file, so I've named it iPhone Case 6s. That's what I'm going to work on. Of course, the first thing to do is to make sure after you've created your new part, from the start menu is to be in part design and click create body. Now, since this is a Boolean operation, we're going to need two bodies, but we'll get to that. Create your sketch. This shall be on the XY plane. Now we're going to create the phone itself, but it's not going to be quite exactly those dimensions. Since we're doing a Boolean subtract, we actually want the phone to be a little bit bigger, or it needs to represent the cavity that we're creating, and that cavity should be bigger than the phone itself. So let's go ahead and make our standard symmetric constraints. Click to delete that horizontal or vertical. Symmetric, click to delete that horizontal. Now the dimensions that I have come up with that work well for me are as follows: 131.2 millimeters long and 60 millimeters wide. We're going to want to add fillets, some sketch fillets. I like to use the constraint preserving sketch fillet. Click those two edges to fillet those corners. Oops. And as you can see, I like to use that fillet type because it preserves this point geometry here. Let's make all of these equal. So select all of them, and to easily make them equal, just add a radius constraint and it'll automatically make those equal. And that number is 7.325. Great. Let's pad that. Leave that direction the way it is, and the value is 7.35. If you remember, the actual thickness of the phone is 7.1 millimeters, so I'm adding a 0.3 millimeter clearance there. Now that we've added this, we need to have our rounded edges, and the way I'm going to do that is with a sweep. So let's create a new sketch, create that on the YZ plane. We're going to want to key off of this, but instead of using reference geometry this time, I'm just going to use the number, the width number we used before, since we know that easily. We need a line, and we need an arc. Now you could also make this model as wide as I'm about to make it here, and then do a radius on both edges, but then it creates a line through the part. I don't really want that, so I'm doing it this way. We can make these tangent. Now what we need to do, since this is already coincident, I just need to add a point on the opposite side. Make these points symmetric. And then we need to dimension it to 60 millimeters. we did not set the radius, which is of course 7.35. Sorry. The diameter is 7.35, so that makes this 3.675. That looks correct. Close that sketch. Now we're going to make it a sweep, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show this sketch and hide the pad geometry. That way we can reuse this sketch from before. Click OK. Nice. Now that's our phone. The next thing that we need to do, though, since we're doing a Boolean subtraction, we're going to make our case shape. But before we do that, we need to make sure we have the window cut out. Since there's a little bit of thickness above this model, this body, when we do our subtraction, if we didn't have the feature I'm about to put on, you would just have a hollow cavity that you couldn't see inside of a larger body. And then you'd have to do a cut. And that's totally doable, but this way I find easier to manage. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a sketch on this surface. And I'm actually going to, I guess I don't need to show that. We're going to import that sketch geometry here. So that was this button, copies the geometry of another sketch. And what I'm going to do with this is make it reference. And then I'm going to make an offset. It's not quite the right offset, but we'll fix it in a second. It's going to be offset a little bit inward, or outboard, not inward. So let's go ahead and make our usual metric constraints. Can I get that point? Metric. Delete that horizontal. Make these 2 points symmetric, and then delete that vertical. We need to add our sketch fillets. And of course, make all of these sketch fillets equal. And that radius should be 7.325. Sorry, we don't even need to do this. The geometry will handle it. So this is what we need to do. We need to make these coincident. There we go. And then we need to set our distance away, which is just 1 millimeter. Excuse me. I forgot. Should not have removed that. Okay, so what is keeping this from being... Now, how did that happen? I thought I made all of these equal. Okay, now those are equal. That's what we want. Click close. Now we're going to pad this, and we're actually going to do symmetric to plane, and we only need it to be 2 millimeters thick. Now the reason why I did symmetric to plane is because where I sketch this, see if I take this off, there's a gap here. And we don't want that in our body. All right, that's pretty much the phone. Now what we need to do in order to use the Boolean operation two or more bodies. You see it says there. We need to create our second body. So I'll go to tasks, create body, create a sketch. I'm making the sketch about the YZ plane, and it's just a rectangle for now. Now we want some thickness below the phone. I'm actually making this a fairly thin part, so it's only 0.75 millimeters thick because it's a skin case. Oh yeah, let's add our symmetric constraints there. And this leg, oh, and then this portion should be 8 millimeters. Now you can see that dimension gives us a thickness above the phone, but below our subtraction, so that we actually get cut out when we would do that subtraction. And then I've estimated that the overall length should be 70.1 millimeters, and that gives us a certain thickness. It should be about 1.5 millimeters on those edges. Click close, click pad, symmetric, and that length should be 141.8 millimeters. All right, there you go. Now with this body selected, select the Boolean operation, select the type, which is cut, and then we're adding this body, which is body 1. All you have to do is click that. Click add body. Click that, and there we go. We've got our hollowed out case. We've subtracted the phone body. Now we're going to add our cutouts and fix things up a little bit here. First thing we want to do is add some fillets. These corner fillets are 12.5 millimeters. Click OK. If we go to the top view, you can see we have a nice equal thickness curve there. Next, we want to add these edge fillets, and those should be 2 millimeters. That looks good. Now let's add our cord cutout and our speaker cutout. So let's add a sketch on this bottom surface. Now I want to add some reference sketches to make our cutouts on the correct axis, meaning the mid-plane of our first body. Since we made our first body relative to this plane, extruding this way, to make it easier to make the case, we need to add these features in. So what I'm doing is adding two reference lines, some construction lines, making them equal, and then I'm setting the overall length to be that 7.35 millimeters. So this will help with our cutouts. We've got headphone jack cutout and our mic cutout. We've got our speaker, and then we need our charger jack, the lightning port. All right, let's actually add some lines connecting these two. Use our trim tool to trim this line and this line. Let's just delete that. We'll make these two coincident and press T for tangent. You should be horizontal, and I'll fix that later. All right, let's set some of our constraints. These two holes should be horizontal. And I'll just go ahead and make these two horizontal as well. This diameter should be 6 millimeters. This diameter should be 2. Go. The distance from the center for this hole is 20.3 millimeters. And this hole, that same plane, is 15.5. Moving over here, this cutout's diameter is 3 millimeters. Its overall length is 12. The slot length is 12. And its furthest position from this plane is 23.5. Then of course, let's make these horizontal. Now for this cutout, let's do it. We need to make some symmetric constraints here. Delete that horizontal constraint. Let's add sketch here, or construction line here, so that we can make these 2 points symmetric about that line. Excellent. This overall height is 5.5. Overall length, 16. Actually, I'm going to add some sketch fillets in there. And those should be all equal and have a radius of 1 millimeter. 1. There we go. Excellent. That's done. Now let's cut that. 5 millimeters is okay. You don't want to do a 2 first cut on this because of these radii. You'll end up getting some funky geometry where it doesn't cut all the way through. All right. Easy enough. Next, what we want to do is make our camera cutout, and then of course the Apple logo cutout. Make a sketch on that bottom surface. This is pretty easy. We've got a circle and a slot. For this slot, to make it a little bit easier to dimension, I'm actually going to add 2 construction lines like before, making them equal to each other on the slot, and that'll enable us to measure to its center. This diameter should be 20 for the logo cutout, and its position relative to the plane there should be 31 millimeters. This slot diameter is 8.5 millimeters. Its length is 10.5. 10.5. And then it's, well, we'll go ahead and add this dimension because that's the one I have. 21. And then this dimension is, all right, 62.25. Okay, close that sketch, cut that. You can leave it at 5 millimeters. There you go. It looks great. The next two features we need are the power or the ringer toggle, the volume buttons, and the power button. Let's go ahead and do the ringer side first. Create a sketch. This again will be 2 slots. There. One here. These two, of course, need to be centered on the phone. So set up your reference geometry, your 2 sketch lines, make them equal, and then the overall height is 7.35. This diameter is 4 millimeters. This as well, 4. Let's add some sketch lines here. Delete that over constraint. These two should be equal. And then, of course, these need to be horizontal to each other. And this dimension should be 49. Of course. And then this slot length should be 3 millimeters. And that's your ringer toggle. Go ahead and do the same thing over here. This dimension is 28.5, and the overall length is 21, and these two should be horizontal. Now our sketch is fully defined. Close the sketch. Create a cut. 5 millimeters is fine. That looks great. Now let's move over here to the power button. Same thing, create a sketch on that plane. Let's create our construction geometry. These two being equal. The overall height being 7.35. We only need 1 slot on this side for the power button. That diameter being 4 millimeters. Creating our construction geometry. Oops. No problem. Go ahead and finish with our constraints. Select those two. Select this toggle. Horizontal constraint to set its Z dimension. And its center is 34.75 from the phone center. Its overall length is 13 millimeters. Close that sketch, create your cut. And there you go. You're pretty much done. Now I did find in my experience that this cutout wasn't quite enough for the power button. Wasn't quite enough for the wide range of lightning cables. The stock one from iPhone fits just fine, but if you get an aftermarket one, they tend to be a bit thicker, and they didn't quite fit for me. So we're going to add one more feature, and it's going to be a little bit of a chamfer. And the way I'm going to do that is with a sketch. So we're going to create a sketch on this plane. I'm going to hide the body. That sounds terrible in any other context. And then I'm going to create some construction lines. For overall dimension, again being 7.35 millimeters. If you remember, the overall length was 141.8 millimeters. So I'm going to need to create some reference geometry to that. I'm creating a chamfer. Oops, lost that constraint there. Just to open up that cutout a little bit. These two should be at 45 degrees. And the overall chamfer is 2 millimeters. So now what I want to do is make this dimension 141.8 divided by 2. That places us at the end. And then I want to mirror these, top and bottom, cut out. And so you can use this feature here, create symmetric geometry, select your symmetry, and there you go. Now these aren't exactly connected, it's just a mirrored geometry. There are no constraints, so you'll have to add in your constraints. That's really the only one you'll need. Then you'll also want to make those equal. Now the overall cutout, if you remember, was 5.5 millimeters, so that's what we set that opening to. And that's it. Close that. We can go ahead and show our body again, and you'll see where it's going to be. We take this and we're going to do a cut. We want it to be symmetric. And I found about 8, excuse me. Oh, that's right. About 8 millimeters was comfortable. Now these edges would be pretty sharp if we just printed them as is. So we're going to want to put a chamfer on there. I think 1.5 was good. 1.3. That's what it was. So use 1.3 and add all of those corners. Nice. That looks good. So we're pretty much done. All we have left to do is a little bit of touch up. So what I liked to do for these cutouts was add chamfer. It made it easier to access the buttons. So chamfer those 3 slots. And then finally, we want to add a little bit of a fillet on these edges just so they're not too sharp. So that should be a 0.5 fillet. And then we just want to add these edges. Click OK. And you're done. You've now made yourself an iPhone case. Hopefully with this tutorial you can expand on it to make cases for other phone sizes. And happy printing. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like on this video and leave a comment to let me know what you thought about this tutorial. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.